welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and as we traverse these fields of esoterica and curiosity, one path continues to lead back home. And in this case, folks, it is the world of the paranormal. Well, pardon the moniker, in Dark Hour Paranormal, but we certainly stay steadfast within the interest of this particular aspect of the field. And I do believe that some of the fascination people hold for this is really reflected in their own desire to be vindicated within their belief of death, or what happens after death. For us to know that in one way or another, in some capacity that can be observed, if not measured entirely, we are seeing evidence of folks who have been here, we've known and loved them, and have passed over, and yet there's still a trace or some remnant left over, maybe intentionally or residually, but either way, the energy is still here and locked. Now, I have my own theories when we talk about interdimensional beings, or we talk about the paranormal, the way that the vibrations fold and even loop back on themselves as you get infinitely smaller within talking about specific dimensions. I'm going to save that for another conversation, which you guys will see very soon. But within this, of course, it's very relevant to look at the world of the paranormal and observe how this realm, or if you want to say it's singular, actually interacts and has some sort of connection with ours. I mean, we don't seem to be too far away from those dearly departed, and yet they seem to be an infinite distance from our tangible experience. But tonight I have with me a very interesting individual by the name of Charles Johnson, who has many years of experience in investigating the paranormal. He's worked in cryptozoology fields as well, and of course UFOs and ufology, and yet I don't think we'll touch too much upon ufology tonight. I may save that with this gentleman for another show, because, you know, most of us, that's what we're talking about these days. That is one of the most consistent fields that we have in front of us, and tonight, folks, like the late Art Bell, who had such a fascination with the world of the paranormal, I certainly share this interest and, of course, have had my experiences as well. But tonight, we're going to be talking to Charles and, of course, about his experiences within that field. So, without further ado, folks, let me introduce to you Charles Johnson. Charles, how you doing tonight? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and, as one fellow investigator to another, it's nice to see that we are still intact, alive, and without certain issue. And, of course, I'd like to discuss, at least in way of a motif for tonight's show, some of the possible inherent dangers that come along with investigating the paranormal. Mm-hmm. But, in your opinion, you may have a different reflection, and, imparting that in certain ways will be an interesting conversation, but we'll see where this goes. Listen, where did you start with your interest in the paranormal before you got involved in any sort of outfit, whether you created it yourself or joined something? What got your attention that there might be something between the folds of perception that we're not normally seeing?
So I was born and raised in the hills of Kentucky, and I can remember, this shows my age, but I can remember the Dewey Decimal System at the library. And my section was 133 point whatever. That was the occult mystery section. And I would read every book I could on Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, lost treasure, anything mysterious. And I also grew up on In Search Of, all those old shows that really kindled my interest in the mysterious.
I can identify with that in many ways. Growing up in the 80s and 90s myself, we had Unsolved Mysteries. We had these specials that would come on every once in a while. You'd have to look into TV Guide in order to catch these and hope that you didn't have some other engagement. But, these were really our introductions into the field, at least within that period of time. There was no internet. Yes, you could go to the library, and of course I had an extensive collection of books, some which still belong to the library, but nonetheless, that was the case. That's how we got our information. So you started with, these pockets of interest and, perhaps these presentations. Where did it go from there that you decided one day that you wanted to explore this further, possibly in the way of a personal experience?
Um, I, I guess my one of my biggest memories is I didn't live too far from Waverly Hills, and that was always a big draw for me. That was my goal in life back then, was to go there and investigate. But after reading so many books, you kind of get to where you want to start doing it for yourself, and that's kind of where all the shows and the books led me. I
Hmm.
started wanting to do the investigations and trying to figure out the answers for myself.
And if I were to jump through this hoop here, obviously we have much to talk about underneath. What have you found in way of personal conviction when it comes to the paranormal?
When I first started, I thought it was pretty black and white. Uh, there was life after death, and the ghosts interacted.
Hmm.
But with more experience, and you kind of touched on it in your introduction, I'm always open up to the possibilities, to other dimensions, different timelines. I always keep that up open as a possibility.
Hmm.
There's just so many. It gets very complex. Even the paranormal spills over into the Bigfoot world sometimes, and into the UFO world. There, some cases, they're all seem to be somewhat of a connection.
What's the most observable connection you found between the paranormal and perhaps Bigfoot or other cryptids?
So in some cases, when someone reported seeing a Sasquatch, they would see what we would in the paranormal world would call orbs or ghost
Hmm.
lights. And if you do a little research, there's also quite a bit of connection of UFO sightings around Bigfoot sightings. So,
Hmm.
I mean, of course, some of them I'm sure are fake or made up or whatever, but there does you start looking at the data, there seems to be at least a possible correlation.
Hmm.
But even more than the UFOs, I think the ghost lights or the orbs um, connected to some of the Bigfoot sightings is pretty interesting.
Do you think, in way of continuity, when we look at this particular phenomenon, we say there's a connection possibly here, that some of these beings may just be traversing different arrays of vibration, even together? So, for example, you have paranormal entities existing on one plane of vibration, and extraterrestrials, let's just say as an example, have the withal to perhaps raise their vibration into that level and maybe pass by, quick high five, you know what I mean, to make it a little more jovial. Do you think they're
Right.
occupying similar spaces in way of where they go when they're not in our present reality?
I think that is a very possible explanation. Going back to the Sasquatch sightings, there's quite a few cases where someone will find a trackway and all of a sudden it stops. There's
Hmm.
nowhere for it to go. It just stops, and you have to kind of try to explain that. Uh, did a portal open? Was it being faked? Or it? The more I study it, the more questions I have, and the more complex it gets for me, anyway.
I think most of us have found that to be the case. But with all this talk about Bigfoot specifically being interdimensional, I mean, there are many people who sit on one side of the fence saying, no, this is completely something flesh and blood. And yet at the same time, you have folks saying, nope, this is actually an etheric being that somehow has physicality, and of course, everything in between. Where do you sit in this respect, and why?
I used to be uh, flesh and blood hardcore. That's what I totally believed, but uh, through friends and some of the big conferences and books and of course videos, there seems to be perhaps more to that. Again, I can't explain it. and I don't even know if that is something I believe, but there's
Mhm.
just a lot of unanswered questions that flesh and blood, at least to this day, can't really explain.
I've often referred to a specific event. I will say wherein Davy Crockett had actually witnessed what we
Hmm.
would consider to be a Bigfoot character of sort.
Right,
The significant thing about his sighting, of course, using the terminology that was accepted at the time in way of religion and superstition, we could certainly read what this man was seeing. He said at the end of this experience, after it had given him a message, that it just dissipated into a thin, wisped cloud of smoke, and poof, that was it. It was gone. So
right,
when we look back at some of the indigenous tribes that live within certain areas and they have maybe a similar story, or they talk about the people of the forest and that they do have magical capabilities, magic being more of a blanket statement of that which we don't explain logically, but yet still
right.
happens. I think, with some of the early settlers and their encounters, those to be much more credible, possibly than some of the more modern day accounts, because back then there was no real reason to fabricate something like that, especially in wave exploration. You come across a lock, and next thing you know, you see a prehistoric dinosaur in there. You're marking it down. You've never been here before. It may not be that out of place for you. Because again, the soil that you're treading on at that moment is foreign, and yet you're still having this experience that may be dictated for centuries to come.
So,
Uh, yep.
right, so many cultures and tribes and have the same basic description of whatever this being is, and going back to the supernatural powers, I've heard a lot about mind speak and
Mm-hmm.
coming out of the flesh and blood. I mean, that's just totally foreign and not really something you really care to ponder. But after you hear it so many times from people that you respect, you gotta say, well, could there be something to it?
It is curious that we talk about Bigfoot and other entities having a telepathic component. We hear this more often than not when it comes to abductions with extraterrestrials
Mm-hmm.
or even run ins with entities within the paranormal and shadow figures. Have you ever been on an investigation or been within the woods, possibly seeking out one of these cryptids and gotten what you would consider to be a telepathic message or a voice within you that did not mimic your internal dialogue?
Personally, I have not. I've felt a feeling of not being wanted, that I should not be there. If that's kind of a related type um, element, I don't know, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But the one time I got just filled with this cold air, totally filled my being, and I knew what was going on. I knew something was there.
This was on a paranormal investigation rather than seeking Bigfoot or something like this?
It was a paranormal investigation, and we were investigating an apartment, and the couple that had invited us to come and investigate, they agreed to leave and let us have the run of the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Right before they left, they said, "Watch the closet door. Something opens the closet door." Well, this is early on in my career, so I wrote it off with a grain of salt. And to myself, I said, "Whatever." And when they shut the door, we set down our equipment cases, and right on cue, the closet door opened up all by itself, and we were all filled with this cold energy. And we shut the door after recovering, tried to walk up and down the hall to make sure the weight might not have jarred it open, but we could never replicate that. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Diane King, thank you very much for your 1999 super sticker. I just want to say $20 super sticker. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support of the show, and I hope you're enjoying the broadcast tonight. We've just gotten started, but thank you so much for your support of Dark Hour Paranormal. Now, I have a question that I haven't yet found any solid answer for, or even possible conjecture, if you will. And this has to do with, we understand that within a specific home or apartment construct of sort, sometimes these entities take up residence. Now, let's say somebody passed away within that apartment that you were in. Let's just say, for the sake of conversation, it was an older woman, and in life, she was a very sweet grandmother and family woman, what have you. So there was nothing nefarious about this person's character. So when they're in this house and you go in and you start kind of defining the route that they may take throughout their existence, why, in your opinion, do you think a lot of these entities will hide in some of the darker corners of the house? Possibly a closet, possibly a crawl space, somewhere in the attic. I mean, within their own space, I understand that they're still seeing that home in its entirety and possibly in its splendor when they were alive. They're experiencing that and possibly creating it from that dimensional existence. Why would they choose such a dark place physically to exist or sort of hang out in?
Um, my guess is that's just our perception of it. That's not necessarily the the actual fact, but one idea would be it's just quiet. It's the less disturbed parts of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. That's a great question. Um, I don't know if, again, if our perception of the spirits going to the basements or the closets, or if that's accurate perception or not, but it could be.
I could see what you're saying with that, not necessarily knowing what actual part of space their perception occupies, and kind of break that down because it's a little convoluted. If they do exist in the same house, and we have this time within what is here, what we've moved around, the changes, augmentations that have undergone some construction and what have you, they do see that on some existence, but they may be as confused as we are when we see them move something about. Have
Right.
you found any correlation in way of within your investigations, the spirits being very upset at the inhabitants' presence, and really that's all it is, nothing more than just feeling that they have something invasive with this physical family coming and living in a place that they still deem their own?
So, um, on investigations, I don't know if you're familiar with the flashlight test. Um, it's just a mini mag flashlight. You twist the head of it where it's barely off, and you use that as a yes no type indicator. I have gotten responses of, are you angry that we're here? Are you angry that the family's here? And the light would come on, indicating a positive response to the question. Or do you want us to leave? And the flashlight would come on, indicating, at least how we perceive it, that they did want us to leave.
But you didn't feel that this was something that they might take an action towards if, the inhabitants said, no, we want to live here in this space, and there was some aggression that ensued, at least in way of verbiage, in way of communication, or possibly environmentally.
Um, I use sometimes I use a ghost box. We've gotten some dark language, almost threatening sometimes in the sessions, but I've never personally seen or been scratched or anything to that degree. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm well aware of that being occurring, but on my investigations, I've never come across that personally.
I find that it's more of a rarity that people are physically attacked in this respect. In fact, it's only happened to me once, and that was within my own home, dealing with an
Yeah.
entity that was present. But, through all the investigations that I had been through and the two entities that were non human entities that had followed me home and caused different issues, I was never visibly physically attacked. Yes, within dream, I'd have hands around my neck. There'd be sleep paralysis. You'd have this sense of dread. All these emotional attacks, psychic attacks that would occur. But only once did I actually have physical scratches up my arm. when I woke up, and these were not scratches that could have occurred during the night, and I had already known what I was wrestling with prior to this manifestation. You know, the flashlight test is very interesting. Goofon says, "Oh no, the flashlight test. Remember when I did that one night and it responded perfectly?" Goofon is a fantastic channel that's been out on YouTube for quite some time, and he did do a live flashlight test on a couple occasions. But I believe there was one. It might have been the first that he did. He was getting perfect responses to a point where it was almost uncanny. And you know, you have to sit back and say, "Well, I don't think it's just the coils heating up so that it expands just enough to touch the battery,"
Right.
because how would that attenuate, right? How would that
Right.
turn off? So there's something else there in way of the flashlight test. I think that's interesting. Aussie Tiger, third phase Goofonian, Quaker, Rocker Fam, mouthful. We're going to get to that question. We're jumping the gun, so hang tight with that, all right? But that's,
So,
what kind of equipment? Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
oh, I was just going to throw out. I try to be very creative in exploring possible explanations. One of mine that I kind of employ is: are we, the investigators, the one that are influencing the flashlight with some type of psychic power? We're concentrating on it so hard that we're able to manipulate it.
What are your thoughts on that as a general notion? Wherein, I mean, we've talked in the past about somebody walking into a location, either they have expectation, they have their own energy that may or may not affect what's going on within, and yet at the same time, as soon as they walk into this place, they are experiencing paranormal activity. What are your thoughts on the subconscious part of ourselves having that much influence?
I think we, as the individual, is the key. As far as like Ouija boards go, or dowsing, or whatever it may be, I think it all always leads back to us, the individuals, our energy, and that might expand into the other parts of the investigation. I don't know. It's possible.
Well, if you consider the human body a conduit in many, many different ways, when you have something like the Ouija board or the dowsing rods or even the tarot cards, it's your energy that's it's influencing what's coming through. So people will often call this some sort of channeling, albeit sometimes more intentional than others. Nonetheless, there is, an aspect of where the Ouija board will stay inert until somebody interacts with it. You look at quantum physics, the slit test. These molecules will behave differently when somebody's observing them. Otherwise, they stay, again, inert and on the trajectory that you would normally imagine. So that's very curious. What is the most dangerous piece of equipment that we can use to contact the spirit world? I mean, I know a lot of people out there, even tonight, will tell you that it's the Ouija board. Hands down, this is a portal that shouldn't be open. Do you hold the opinion that there is something out there like that? And if so, what might it be?
Personally, I can't say this is dangerous. This is not. Like you, I always hear the Ouija board, and I don't always try to be cautious, but I'm not sure that's accurate. I think we are the portal. You always want to be careful and not bring things home, and definitely close down things, and you definitely have to be careful.
So with that in mind, why?
Well, in my case, I mean, I would love if my apartment was haunted. I mean, I'd be very, very okay with that.
Don't hear that every day.
But my wife would not. She would not be a very happy camper. And maybe it's just the stigma. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just our natural fear from lack of understanding. We're naturally raised to be scared of ghosts. I mean, maybe it's what we're taught. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown. Going back to the quantum physics and quantum theory, I think one day all the paranormal and science will be one. I think all of it will be explained and understood. And while I think that's fascinating. It's also kind of a little sad, I guess, because it takes a little of the mystique away. But I think that will be the case.
I have to agree with you 100%, and it's something that I have been saying since day one. You know, this connection, for some unknown reason to us at this time, we see this connectivity between such different aspects of this field of esoterica. I mean, I can't think of a comprehensive field the way that this is in way of relation to each of these subjects. I do believe that one day science will catch up. And many years ago, I used to say, well, you know, science and religion sort of have to eventually come on par. And I think religion was saying one thing. I was actually talking about spirituality. I didn't realize it at the time. And then science is saying another thing. But I always saw this desire between the two to sort of find that common ground in way of comprehension. I think we're on that path right now. And in fact, when
Hmm.
we talk about some of these cryptids that may have evolved differently, we may be seeing reflected aspects of ourselves that we just haven't honed. Now, when you talk about equipment, of course, this is our futile attempt at really taking a mechanism and
Right.
connecting, you know, that world to ours. Yeah, Edison was very successful at doing this. I
Hmm.
mean, depending on who you ask, but at least he was one of the first known ones to contact the other side with his telephone. What are some of the pieces of equipment that you tend to lean on, and what do they do for you in an investigation?
So if I had to choose one uh, foundation, it would just be a simple digital recorder for EVPs. Um, I'm starting to gain some experience with the spirit box. For me, it takes a while to learn, and I'm not that good at it yet, but I'm learning. Um, also been using the SLS camera
Mm-hmm.
to some degree. Um, all the K2 meters, but I love the spirit box and the digital recorders for EVPs.
Now, I keep hearing it back in my mind, you know, coming back to this fear or the notion of fear when it comes to the paranormal. And you know, through my own experiences, I would sit here today and say, yes, it is very important that you be careful and you tread carefully and you use the right verbiage when you try to reach out to these particular spirits, because sometimes you don't really know who you're going to get, and it goes beyond what we understand in the way of a Ouija board. You walk into a location knowing that there's something very dark and heavy there, but you don't realize that there may be something underneath that in way of a legion, or even spirits that are sort of trapped within that location because of this overarching energy. Do you feel that there is any peril in any way, shape, or form going into an investigation, even somebody who just has the weekend curiosity and is, you know, passionate about this subject?
I do. I believe there is a danger. I do believe in the demonic, but I mean, I've never come across it and hope I never do. Also, like, I think the human spirits, there's mischievous, mean, um, and I think they're all seeking communication and some type of energy source to make that communication possible.
Hmm.
So attachments, I think, are possible.
What do you think would cause one of these energies to attach to someone? I mean, you could walk into any location, and this could be a possibility for, you know, any person.
Just like our need to eat, I think that spirit may, when they find a source, just attach and start
Hmm.
feeding off that spiritual energy.
So we're looking at something predatorial then.
In some cases, yes.
Would you consider those predatorial energies, the way we're describing, to have been human at one point in time, or to be more on the side of something non-human?
My guess and just my personal opinion would be that would be a mix of both. Both would be possible.
Interesting. Interesting. I often, personally tend to think of some of these heavier energies, at least in what I've come in contact with, to be much more ancient, uh,
Hmm.
even to the point where one of them would not respond to white light. I mean, it just broke through that barrier like
Right.
it was nothing. And that actually scared the hell out of me because that's what
Hmm.
at the point, I thought that was my best defense. And yet I still had to up the ante, which I
So,
did learn how to do.
so maybe you can help me with a question. I've been working on a theory. I'm somewhat familiar with the Bible and Old Testament and New Testament, and
Hmm.
I was trying to think of a situation where demons existed without a body host. I was reminded of the story when Jesus drove out the demons but put them into the pigs. So I was wondering, do they need a host of some type?
See, I'm going to bring this a little bit deeper than you probably intended. I think that in certain circumstances, entities that come from very specific vibrational levels to exist here and sustain that existence do need some sort of physical anchor. Now, there are many stories about the collapse of Atlantis, but one of the most prominent ones that I have come across, which was built on with Edgar Casey, built on with
Hmm.
Drunvalo Melchizedek, there are many different names that kind of put their efforts into this particular rendition of what might have happened. Long story short, when Atlantis fell, through all that cataclysm, apparently there was some sort of tear that occurred between the vibrational states of dimensions. And within this, because it was such a chaotic thing to happen, there were souls and bodies from this physical reality that got sucked up into that, and there were many who, from the other dimension, fell into this one and had absolutely no reference point to where they were. So what ended up happening is what I understand, these souls quickly went into the closest vessel that they had the opportunity to. So unfortunately, a lot of Atlanteans at that point were walking around with tens to hundreds of different souls or attachments occupying that energetic field in that space. So what that rendition is, what you're telling me in way of what Jesus did in casting them into pigs, to me sounds like a reflection of something that may have happened in our past. I mean, there are many different interpretations of the Bible, and of
Right.
course, we could go over this, for the rest of our lives, really. But when you look at something that has a little bit of leg and really sits solidly within some soil, and then you come back to something we're very familiar with, like the story of the Bible, you start seeing different parallels that
Hmm.
may or may not have that consistency, but upon further research we would find it. So that would be my answer in that respect. I think that it has to do, once again, simply with the vibration and being able to sustain its existence within this particular physicality. Some of these entities are much lower in vibration. So for them to go into a higher vibration, I think they need some sort of ladder or rope up, which sometimes happens to be us. And not necessarily just us, but the energy that we have.
Right. Very interesting.
Universally, we're seeing some of this in way of experience and, for time memoriam. I'm not saying that right, but for as long as anybody can remember, this is something we've dealt with. What are your thoughts? And I'll bring a little bit of my own theory into this. What are your thoughts about the ancient civilizations that, obviously our ancestors had contact with a lot of these spirits, maybe of the land, water,
Hmm.
elemental spirits in many different ways. But some of them, we would sit back and say, oh, I would never engage with that particular energy. It's like a demon. But yet they
Hmm.
had some sort of balance. Today, we've sort of forgotten that. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that as a
I
theory?
th- I think a lot of the old ways are right. I think
Hmm.
uh, we as a modern society have forgotten and assume we're so educated that the old ways must be wrong. Um, I love investigating things like fairies. I mean, I don't want
Hmm.
to go out screaming and telling everybody I believe in fairies, but I think it's interesting. It's possible with all the other dimensions and things like that. So I think all these things are very plausible, and at least are worth investigating, and not just writing off as some fairy tale that couldn't be, at least have a kernel of truth to it.
I agree with that, and the fairies or elementals are certainly a very large topic that we could delve into, because I happen to believe that that is certainly a facet of our experience, and we've been working with elementals in different ways, and I think that they actually interact with us more than we interact with them these days. But when we talk about, again, the ancient civilizations having this balance with those energies, and perhaps we were more in line with a natural state of being, where does our equipment in way of communication come into this interpretation? I mean, are we doing this correctly, or are we just sort of stumbling around in the dark with our gadgets, ignoring the fact that we can do this with our own body?
That's a great question. Some days I love the equipment, and some days I hate it. It's just, they can definitely be a anchor and a stumbling block. And just take the subject of remote viewing. I mean, pretty much that's just you and a pencil and paper and coordinates, maybe. But I find that whole fascinating, and you don't need all the gadgets and $1,000 equipment. That's pretty much just you. And a lot of times we're so fixated on getting the newest piece of gadgets that we think look fancy or are supposed to be the top-notch line of equipment. I think that can be a stumbling block, but if kept in perspective, some of it at least can be useful.
So how important is it to have, not only a tech guy on a team of paranormal investigators, but also an intuitive or clairvoyant?
Personally, I think they would both be very important. A lot of times, once we get the equipment set up, I love just to sit and be quiet, and just get a feel of the place and see what happens. A lot of times we're so busy trying to bark instructions or get results that we don't give them a chance to respond.
Have you ever had an experience where you were out in the field and you were asking certain questions and did not get the response at the time, but day, two later, a week later, all of a sudden you get that response in one way, shape, or form?
I have gone to investigations and not have gotten anything, and then a couple days later on a recording, oh yeah, they did respond. And I can't say this is 100% paranormal, but my wife and I, we have 3 words stenciled on our wall: faith, love, and hope. Pretty traditional. And one night I went on an investigation and nothing happened. Pretty quiet. And I got back the next night and went to bed. And when I got up the next morning, the word faith had been ripped off halfway. It was still dangling. And who knows, maybe it was the cat. But I just thought that was very interesting. It was that word, and it was just kind of, it's never done it since or before. And I guess to me, it kind of took me by surprise that it would be that word, faith.
It seems more than what we'd call coincidental. I mean, I don't happen to believe in coincidence. That's sort of an expression for an organization or some sort of thing that you're following has consecutive order that we just don't understand the process. So synchronicity is probably the next best word. But
exactly.
With this in mind, though, I mean, we talk about going out to the location. We talk about attachments. I mean, if there's a possibility that something came home with you enough to disturb your immediate environment, what do you do before you go into the field to protect yourself from this sort of result?
I try to always before pray for protection, make it known, kind of draw boundaries, and especially before I leave, whatever is here, we always come in respect, but you need to stay here. You're not allowed to go home with me. And overall, it's been pretty effective. Um, I know some. I've heard some investigators have told some pretty troubling stories, but overall, I've so far things have been pretty good.
Would you consider yourself a religious man?
Not in the traditional term. I do believe in God. I do believe Jesus is the Son of God and is coming again. But I don't go to church every Sunday. But I do lean towards the Christian faith, and I do believe in the end days that are coming.
Is it important to have that backing of religion when getting involved within the paranormal?
For me, it is, and that's been a big challenge trying to work in the paranormal into my religious background and beliefs. Uh, it's hard. A lot of times, it's things are automatically written off as demonic, uh, which, in my opinion, is not correct all the time. Uh, I've had to broaden my thinking with my experiences. You always get the argument it's Satan is deceiving you, and I mean that's always possible. I think.
Mm-hmm.
From coming from a Christian perspective, you have to kind of hold on to foundational beliefs, but be a little more open-minded in some of the experiences, and again with the physics and the quantum, all the new quantum theories.
Mm-hmm.
Things are just getting really complex and fascinating.
Well, we're, I think, coming to a more broader understanding of what we previously could not explain within the constructs that we understood. That is certainly a positive thing, and yeah, it does challenge our intellect a little bit, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
natural understanding. There are parts of us that understand it intellectually, and parts of this we understand intuitively, and to measure that is very difficult. Now, you said that you never had a demonic experience, and hoped that you never did. Could you impart on us one of the most or the most tumultuous experience that you had within the field of the paranormal, either out on an investigation or within working with somebody who's been afflicted? What's the worst thing you've seen?
Uh, Personally, it's just I've seen some families that have been really terrified. And number one, they don't know what to do. Number two, they don't know who to go to for help. They don't think anybody would believe them. They think they would just be called crazy. And some of these families are very fearful, and it's a horrible thing to be terrified of going to sleep in your own home.
Absolutely, I've been there myself. It's one of the most unsettling things that you'll ever experience if you have the pleasure of
I
experiencing that.
I would love to hear your story one day.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to tell you all about it, my friend. I mean, it really comes down to just knowing what you're getting involved in. And yes, there was a part of me, and I'm not afraid to admit it, I wanted that darker experience. I wanted to come up against something that had the ability to possess. I wanted to find like a deep, dark thirst within me. I was drawn to the darkest places that were out there, at least within my radius of being able to travel. And God damn it, it found me. And the first time it happened, I dealt with it as something very unfamiliar. I had people that I spoke to who gave me some suggestion. In the end, it was really my own volition that brought it in, and my own volition that made amends with that
Do
invitation, I will say.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what or who it was?
I do know that this was a particular entity raised through some sort of satanic ritual that had happened on the property with individuals that had been identified, and they had no real understanding of what they were doing. They pulled this thing out, didn't know how to put it back, so therefore it was roaming around this particular location. It was exorcised off another investigator 8 months prior to it coming home with me. And I've actually had conversation. She was on the show a few months ago, Joni Mahan, who wrote an entire book on her experience with this one particular entity. Now, the funny thing, Charles, is that when I spoke to another investigator who was very familiar with this location and had actually informed me of what this entity was, when it found its way to me, he sort of laughed and said, well, it seemed to be hungry, because it said, don't go over to this particular part, just stay over here, which we did. But sure enough, during the investigation, one of the guys did hear footsteps come into the root cellar that we were in, and next thing you know, I started having experiences. Oh man, I almost felt like I was out of body in the most uncomfortable of ways, and left that place knowing that something just wasn't right. But the lesson I learned was that when you call for these, and whatever aggression or attitude that you present, especially with these lower energy entities or these more angry entities, they're going to reflect that right back to you. So what happens then? And to me, this is where the inherent danger comes in. You have somebody who's versed in watching taps or loves ghost adventures. God forbid you go out there and provoke like Zach Bagan does. I mean, have you guys actually looked at this guy today? He looks old. The guy looks like he's been stressed out, put through a ringer, and there's a lot to do with that energy, and I guarantee you he's still got something within his auric field. I mean, look at that museum that he has. I mean, you can't tell me that something's not there.
Yeah, I'm sure. You're 100% right.
And yet there are people who aspired, especially early on when Ghost Adventures was really something up and coming, and had a different technique and way of delivery. People latched on to that, myself included. I thought that was really interesting to be more forthright rather than sort of pussyfoot around. Are you here? What's going on? You want to get, hey, what's going on? Who's here? We thought this was more direct, and that was probably the best thing to do. But again, as I learned, when you call for them, they will come, but not always in the time that you are aware of. They'll come when they're ready to come, and non-linear. Yep, go ahead.
So personally, do you know why they changed their format? Did they have a bad experience and say maybe we should rethink this, or did it just kind of evolve that way?
What do you mean, from the entity side?
For the Ghost Adventures team.
Oh, they started having tough experiences. I mean, let's see, what was his name? Aaron, I think, the camera guy.
Yeah.
He was hit first, and then what the hell is his name? The other guy there. I mean, it's been a while since I watched. Nick, thank you.
Yeah.
Nick's marriage actually dissolved as a result of something that had followed him home and caused problems. These guys have stories that'll make your hair stand on end because of what they've decided to do. And sometimes it's apparent when they're out there in the investigations getting sick. Well, yeah, it's probably not supposed to happen when you're working with these entities unless you...
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now you're good now. No, you're good.
Microphone came unplugged there. Weird. Just make sure that we're on the right. Yep, we're looking good here. Okay. So, now within these entities that you've come up against in way of your investigations, do you find that there are more souls that don't realize they've passed on? Of course, we've heard that this is a possibility. Somebody dies traumatically. Next thing you know, they're standing outside their body. They thought it was weird. They see their body, but, I think I'm still alive. There doesn't seem to be any change. Do you find that more often than something more impactful in the way of a negative experience?
Overall, I think I would have to say that the spirits that we've contacted are pretty much aware that they've passed on. I guess there's been a couple that weren't aware or knowledgeable that they were dead, but on a majority, I would say most of them were aware.
Within this type of work that we decide to have a hand in, oftentimes there comes certain consequence of inquiry. And what I mean by that is that if you come up against a soul or a spirit that was once human and you see that this is lost, do you feel any responsibility to perhaps help it to the other side or usher it in a way that may be helpful, or do you just acknowledge the presence?
So far, I have just really acknowledged it and tried to have a conversation with it. Perhaps one day down the road, I will have the ability to do that. I guess in my thinking, I asked myself, why in the world would I have the knowledge to help a spirit pass over? If the world is created in such a way, or are all realms, wouldn't they naturally know to go on? I mean, it's a complicated situation. And I hate to think that some souls out there are lost and don't know. That's a scary thought.
I think it's scary for us too, because we picture ourselves in that same position, being lost within a plane of existence that we don't necessarily seem to be familiar with. And yet there are many, many near-death experiences that talk about, people who maybe don't have the religious background but still have a very similar experience wherein they pass over and it's like they're in an environment where all they feel is love. Now, I think that there are definitely layers within this interpretation. There are, let's say, for example, souls that have lived many lifetimes within this third dimension here on this earth and have gone through this many times before, and perhaps they don't need to see, a deceased family member help them cross over, for that comfort. They can just do this in a natural sense. But, you and I talking, maybe we're one of those people, but we're not ready to, find that out for ourselves, and won't know that until possibly that very last moment where we do make the cross. So right. It's a curious thing to contemplate, and of course it all lies in the realm of conjecture, but that is one of the better tools we have. And then of course we look towards consistencies and way of the experiences, and we come up with some sort of formulated intellectual deduction about what we might be seeing, or at least a solid hypothesis.
I think in the last few years, there's been some great studies of near-death experiences, and they're gaining lots of knowledge from those cases.
Absolutely, Charles. Well, listen, we're getting close to the end of our show, the top of the hour here, folks. I want to thank you, my friend, for coming on, and give you just a moment to let us know if you want us to contact you. So throw out an email, or if you have websites or anything like that. Yeah.
I'm on Facebook, Anomalous Investigations, or my personal page, Charles Howard Johnson, and I would love to come back one of these days, hopefully sooner than later.
Absolutely, Charles. I think next time you come aboard, we can actually get into the subject of elementals and fairies. It's something that I love to discuss, and to be quite honest, there are very few who are versed or have had experiences directly or indirectly with this type of energy. But those who have, or at least have done some research, man, they have something to say about it. It's a real phenomenon.
Well, I've got some stories for you, so I'll be here.
Oh, God, so do I, my friend. And you know what? We'll talk about that within our own conversations, but I will certainly welcome you back to the show to get into that in detail.
Well, it's been an honor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Charles. I appreciate you, brother. If you don't mind hanging out for just a moment, I'll put you backstage. I'll say my proper goodbyes off camera. If you have to go, I understand, too, either way.
Okay, I will talk to you soon then. You have a good night.
All right, brother. Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you.
Bye.
Folks, Fantastic, fantastic show. I know Charles has to work in the morning, and I'm just happy that he had the time and withal to sit with us for an hour here on Dark Hour Paranormal. How's this new time slot working out? I saw we had quite a few in the chat tonight enjoying what we were doing, and I really, really appreciate that. Ah, look at this. Hey, Den Bub with a $6.90, it's a $7 super chat. Hey, brother, thank you so much, man. Continued supporter of Jesus, I almost said goof on. Where am I taking that verbiage from? Continuing supporter of Dark Hour Paranormal. Thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate that. And of course, Diane also had dropped in with a super sticker earlier in the show. And of course, I really appreciate it, guys. It's you know what? We're not out here pining for money. And you know what? I feel much more comfortable when people donate of their own accord. I'm not on a payroll. It's not expected that I get a paycheck every month. This comes from the heart, you know, what I give to you. And when you guys donate what you do, again, completely of your own volition, and this is what you want to do, I appreciate the money, but I feel the heart behind that. I feel the love, and I'm not shitting you on this. That is what I experience when I see you guys. And it doesn't just take a super chat, please. Just your presence here in the chat and just seeing you guys involved and engaging is really what I'm after, guys. Yeah, we all want to make it a full-time thing. Man, it'll happen. I'm not worried about it. As long as we're enjoying the moment and living in the moment, hell, we're going to keep doing that. Hey, I want to apologize if my volume was a little low tonight. Not really sure what happened there. I did try to make some adjustments. Hopefully that changed it. But Charles' audio was very loud from the get-go. We had some issues backstage prior to the show, and I was just crossing my fingers that we were able to have him audible through this without, you know, any sort of difficulty. And at least I think we were able to do that. I'm going to redo the studio soon with a couple things in mind. So certainly stick around. We have lots to come. Next week, I have Manny, Area 503 coming on. We're going to get back into the controversy that was spurred up by his fantastic documentary on Lou Elizondo. Right now, you can't see it. It's been taken down by YouTube because there was an individual, and I try to stay out of the drama unless somebody brings my name into it. There was an individual who you all know who struck him for 90 seconds of video, and yet this guy is calling the kettle black, to say the very least. Long story short, Manny will make a very quick edit, and that movie will be back in its entirety on YouTube. And if you haven't seen it, one of the most, if not the most comprehensive profile on Lou Elizondo that I've ever seen. Certainly well worth your time to go and check out, guys. I implore you to do just that. Mysteria Dragonhawk, thank you so much for the $3 super sticker. I really appreciate your support as well. And yeah, for those of you who enjoyed the metal version of the Crop Circle song, I appreciate you checking that out. If you're interested in hearing that, go over to Facebook under Quincy Roser. You can catch my profile there. It is posted. I did not make it public on the channel because it's a peripheral endeavor, something that I just had fun with, and I think that sometimes people get put off when you hold a certain image, even if it's something like black metal. You know, people have their own opinions and they hold judgment. So, hey, I have to augment things the way that they seem appropriate, but I'm still going to continue to put out certain content, especially when I like to make it, and I know you guys like listening to it. We will certainly have another guest as well next week. I don't want to say the name just yet because I need to confirm, but with that said, 2 to 3 interviews is what I'm shooting for, and of course, the third phase of Moon has some really exciting stuff to come, and we're going to be revealing that as time goes on. But in the meantime, folks, stay vigilant, stay curious, and stay explorative within this beautifully nebulous field that we all traverse in search of the truth. Until next time, guys, keep your heads up, huh? All right. Man, I really enjoyed that. Charles kind of came out of the woodwork for me, responding to a post that I was booking out, you know, for this next month, and I was curious if anybody wanted to come aboard and you know, take one of those slots. Charles very quickly said, "Hey, I investigate the paranormal. Let me come on the show." So I talked to him briefly, and next thing you know, I thought, man, this would be a great fit, but we didn't get into the detail that we did tonight. Area 503 with a $5.03 appropriate super chat. Thank you so much, my man. He says, we love your dedication and passion, DHP. Hey, man, right back at you. The labor of love that was that documentary, the service I think you're doing for the community and putting this out is something that I can't even express in words, Manny. Thank you so much, Area 503. And guys, definitely go and check that out when he reposts it within the next coming days here. All right. It goes like this, right? And it goes a little something like this. All right, guys, we'll see you. What's today? Thursday? Yeah, we'll see you next week. Until then, ciao. Manny said the movie is on Odyssey, and you guys can go and see it right now, Odyssee. Go check it out, folks. Thanks, Manny.